Since 1986, Gary Michael Heidnik had been kidnapping, raping, and torturing 6 women, keeping them imprisoned in the basement of his home in Philadelphia. He turned these women into sex slaves, forcing them to torment one another, even dismembering one of them into pieces and forcing the others to eat her flesh. However, during the 1980s, with 50 followers at the church where he worked, no one could have imagined that their Bishop Heidnik was the real-life Buffalo Bill. Every Sunday they gathered at his home, but just beneath their feet, in the basement, Gary Heidnik kept 6 women locked in a pit. Hello everyone, welcome back to the Unsolved Mysterious Cases channel. I'm Michael Vincent. Let's explore this case together. A little reminder, if you've seen The Silence of the Lambs, you might have a better understanding of what's going on in this video. Now, let's get started. Gary Heidnik was born on November 22, 1943, in Eastlake, Ohio. As a child, he was often abused by his father. Because he wet the bed, his father made him hang dirty bed sheets outside for the neighbors to see. He remained a loner until high school, then graduated and joined the Army. However, due to mental health issues, mainly multiple personality disorder, he was discharged after only 13 months of service and worked as a nurse for a short time. Before that, he realized that religious superstition was an effective way to control the masses. In 1971, Gary Heidnik founded the United Church of Christ in Philadelphia, initially with only 5 members and an investment of $1,500, but the church has since grown significantly. He even managed to raise over $500,000 for the church. Additionally, he learned how to manipulate people, applying these skills to the women he kept in the basement. He had previously been sued for sexual assault, but never served time in prison. He was also accused of raping Betty Disto, a Filipino bride he married in 1985, but after she gave birth to their child and left him, the case was dropped due to the disappearance of the key witness. In fact, Heidnik had 2 children with 2 different women, both of whom complained about his crazy sexual behavior and the fact that he often locked them up. But before long, his actions escalated to a whole new level. In a 1990 interview, Gary Heidnik's first victim, Josefina Rivera, recounted her experience living with this Buffalo Bill figure. In 1986, Gary Heidnik kidnapped what was considered his first victim, Josefina Rivera, from a mail-order service. What's unbelievable is that, according to multiple testimonies, Heidnik actually turned her into an accomplice. However, the way he abducted her was as brutal as how he took the other victims. Like the real Buffalo Bill, who targeted women, Rivera was a prostitute, lured to his house with money in exchange for sex. After Rivera put her clothes back on, Heidnik came up from behind, strangled her, and dragged her down to the basement. He bound her hands and feet with chains, sealed her to a bolt with super glue, and everything in her life seemed to flash before her eyes. Gary Heidnik beat her with a stick until she stopped screaming. Next, he threw her into a pit, covered it with wooden planks, and locked her inside, leaving only a small sliver of light coming through the gaps in the wood. Over the next 3 months, he abducted 5 other women, all captured in the same way. They were strangled, bound, thrown into a deep pit, and then covered with wooden planks, only to be dragged out when Heidnik was ready to rape or torture them. After being released, Rivera admitted that when isolated from the outside world, no matter who abducts you, you will start to develop feelings for them because they are the only connection to the outside world, the only source of life. Rivera sided with Heidnik and was made the leader of the other women. This was his way of dividing them. If Rivera followed his commands, he would reward her with hot chocolate and sausage, letting her sleep outside the pit. But he made it clear that if she didn't obey, she would lose all privileges. On one occasion, when a woman displeased him, Heidnik punished them by beating and torturing them. Sometimes he used duct tape to seal their mouths, slowly inserting a screwdriver into their ears just to watch them squirm. If Rivera wanted to keep her privileges, she knew she had to help him torment the others. Once, Heidnik instructed Rivera to fill the pit with water, connect exposed wires to the chains of the other women, and electrocute them right in front of her. The shock was so strong that one victim, Deborah Dudley, was killed. Heidnik barely reacted, simply saying, "Yeah, she's dead," and walked away. But that wasn't the most horrifying death. The most terrifying death was that of Sandra Lindsay. Shortly after capturing Rivera, Gary Heidnik lured this intellectually disabled woman into his trap. Lindsay couldn't endure the torture, so Heidnik punished her by starving her for several days. When he finally gave her food again, she was unresponsive. When the others saw their friend's death, they began screaming for several minutes. Heidnik told them to be quiet, or they would be next. He then dragged her body upstairs, dismembered it, and roasted her ribs in the oven while boiling her head on the stove. Neighbors smelled a strange odor and reported it to the police, but he claimed he had only burned a piece of meat, so the police let it slide. Later, he stored her limbs in the refrigerator, ground the flesh, and mixed it with dog food, then fed that mixture to the other women. I won't describe that scene any further. You can watch Black Society 2 by Gordon Lamb to get an idea. In the end, whether she was an accomplice or not, Josefina Rivera truly saved everyone. After gaining Heidnik's trust, he used her as bait to capture other women. This allowed her to have contact with the outside world, although Heidnik was always closely monitoring her. On March 24, 1987, Rivera took advantage of Heidnik's trust and was temporarily allowed to leave the basement after helping him capture his seventh victim. She convinced him to let her visit her family for a short while. After some internal struggle, Heidnik agreed. Rivera walked to the corner, escaped his sight, and ran straight to the nearest phone booth to call 911 and alert the police. The police immediately arrested Gary Heidnik at a gas station and raided his horrific home. After 4 months of captivity and torture, the women were finally rescued. During the trial, despite Heidnik trying to use his history of mental illness to plead for a lesser sentence, he was convicted and sentenced to death in July 1988. He attempted suicide in prison the following month, but was discovered and stopped. Ultimately, on July 6, 1999, Heidnik was executed by lethal injection, becoming the last person to be executed in Pennsylvania. As for Buffalo Bill, this is a character from the famous crime movie The Silence of the Lambs, inspired by Heidnik himself. As for his followers, it's hard to know how much they truly knew. Even after his arrest, they continued to attend church. Despite all the news outlets reporting on how Heidnik tortured his victims, the followers still attended his church services on Sundays. At least one of his followers, Tony Brown, actually helped Heidnik torture the women. Brown considered himself Heidnik's closest friend. When Heidnik starved Lindsay to death, Brown was there. When Heidnik dismembered her, Brown was also there. However, Brown had an intellectual disability. According to his lawyer, Brown was a victim who had been deceived by Heidnik, and he was eventually acquitted due to lack of evidence. That concludes today's program. If you liked it, please press the like button. I'm Michael C. Vincent, and I'll see you next time.